Oh,
Yeah,
all right,
let's
perfect.
roll.
So today's topic, we're going to talk a little bit about negotiating. So I don't know about you guys, but one of my things that as a broker I miss the most is playing the game and playing the negotiating game and the strategies and that come with playing that game and just knowing how to uh, just strategically know how to do the negotiating strategies that you need to get to that yes, to get to that deal and get that negotiating strategy together. So today we're going to just discuss about negotiating. It's one of those topics that, interesting enough, isn't really taught a lot outside of the teaching realm of real estate. So I'm excited to share some of my thoughts and ideas and nuggets with you guys, and hopefully you'll get one or two nuggets to take away today in regards to negotiating. It's an interesting concept for me where we see that why is it in North America that negotiating seems to be an awkward or almost unacceptable activity, but in other parts of the world it's just something that you do every single day. It's just part of the culture. It's just part of of what we do on a daily basis in that. And so I find it almost one of those awkward or uncomfortable or undiscussed concepts and strategies that we talk about in North America. So I don't know about you, but my wife says that like anytime I let go of a dollar, I just get a better grip on it. And that I always love my favorite question, and I'll teach you one of this is that the best you can do? And so
Yeah.
using that question over and over again, is that the best you can do? Is that the best you can do? This is the time of year from an agent standpoint and from a broker standpoint that I'm actually out there negotiating. So truthfully honest, all my suppliers and all that, once a year, I'll call them and I'll ask them, is that the best you can do? Cell phone providers, copier provider, anything that I'm paying for from a brokerage standpoint, an office standpoint, company standpoint, or personal standpoint, I'm out asking that question, is that the best you can do? And what I ask you, what does it hurt to ask? If you don't ask, you don't get. And so one of those things that you can start off by practicing your negotiating is get out there and look at your service providers and ask them, shop around and ask them, is that the best you can do? And it's a great practice for you to practice your negotiating skills and get past that fear or that uncomfortableness of having that thought that it's unacceptable to ask. Is that, can you do any better? Is that the best you can do? So there's one strategy for you on the negotiating standpoint, is to go out there and practice, but also look at cutting down your expenses, look at cutting down your costs, and that moving into the slower months of the year, and that to help you out. So I believe that who are the greatest negotiators in the world? I don't know anybody in the room that has kids, but so kids, children, why are they the best negotiators in the world? And what do they bring to the table? So some of the things I see in the negotiating skills of kids is that their innocence and their lack of knowledge is almost their gift. They don't know any better. They're persistent. They're relentless.
Yeah.
They don't take no for an answer, right? You'll notice this young man here, no, bedtime's at 10 p.m. Thanks for letting me know, mom and dad, just so you know that's what's happening. So, I look at it and think to myself, agents almost need to be more childlike. We need to be a little bit more relentless. We need to be a little bit fearless. We need to be a little bit more of that tenacity and that, not to be obnoxious, not to be rude, not to be unfair, not to be a bully, but to just take some of those character traits from a child and what they do, children do on a negotiating standpoint, and implement it and put it into your practices and what you do on a regular basis, day to day, from negotiating skills and what you're experiencing day to day in real estate. Okay. And so sometimes eliminating those fears, sometimes just forgetting about what I know is to be true or what I think is to be true, and squashing that little voice in my head and just going all in and being there and letting go. Now, I'm going to be clear that my thoughts on negotiating is that I believe that it's a win-win, not a win-lose. Okay, it's a win-win. And when you are skilled and when you know and you play this game at that high level, that you know that everybody at the end of the negotiations felt like they won in some way, shape, or form. Would you agree? That's the best outcome from negotiating, when you have a win-win, not a win-lose outcome. Would you agree?
Yes. Yes.
Okay, so how do we get that? So let's start looking at this. When do the negotiations begin for our sellers? So I'm going to say that to you, my thought is that when the negotiation begins for a seller, it's when they choose their asking listing price. Okay. The game is on for the seller. They've positioned themselves, they've anchored themselves, they've established that this is the negotiation has begun now. They've chosen their price, they've chosen where to start, and that's when they start to choose their negotiation. Okay. Now, when does it start for a buyer? I'm going to argue that I believe that it starts for a buyer when they start positioning themselves or when they start playing their cards. So when they start objecting to something, when they start making comments or changes that. So do people buy properties that they make negative remarks about? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. I think they do all the time. And that's when the buyer is. So as an agent, you have to recognize that the seller begins their negotiation process when they choose their asking price and their listing price. Okay. Now, the buyer is going to choose it when they start positioning themselves. So when they start making negative comments, when they start saying, making improvement ideas or suggestions or things like that, that's when the buyer is starting to position themselves in the negotiation. Oh, this needs a lot of work. Okay, that's not an objection. That's my buyer starting to play the game here, to start negotiating process. That when they start doing that, they're positioning themselves, they're justifying in their mind what needs to be done with that. That's a buying signal. That's a negotiating signal. It's not an objection. So be careful, especially gentlemen, be careful not to jump in and try to fix it. Try to comment on it. Let your buyer position themselves. Let them start the beginning, the negotiation process. Let them start going through it, sharing their objections, sharing their changes that they need to have, their comments, whether they're negative or positive, and that. Let the negotiations begin. Don't be a negotiation buster and kill buzz that by trying to fix it or comment on that. Just be negotiating strategies for agents. I'm going to argue is the person that says little or nothing is probably the world's greatest negotiator. Silence is a powerful, powerful negotiating technique in that. So when I'm presenting and doing these conversations, doing these webinars, yes, I can talk a dog off a meat wagon. I get it. That's my gift. I talk and this and that, a million miles an hour and that. But when I'm negotiating, I'm trying to be that stealth, quiet, reserved, be slow to speak, slow to talk, and that a negotiator when I'm playing the game. I'm a different person than I am when I'm presenting here on the webinar, if that makes sense. Okay, so be cautious and be careful in what you're doing and how you're doing that. Now, what are the challenges for us in the marketplace, agents today in the marketplace? So I would say that the challenges out there is that most agents don't have any training in this field, and their training is when they're out there doing it for the first time and negotiating their first deals in that. They're out in the field practicing. How's that working? If you're a golfer, you're out practicing on the course. How does that work for you? When you're out in real estate agents, you're out practicing in the field and that. You're making mistakes. You're saying things that you shouldn't be saying. You're doing things that you shouldn't be doing, and that's causing a huge barrier and a challenge for that. One of the things I notice is that agency and representation and legal representation of our clients kind of becomes a barrier, where we see these agents that believe they're Spartacus and they're the white knights and like, I'm going to go out there and I'm going to just hammer the seller. Well, that doesn't work in a win-win negotiation. Or the white knight agent for a listing agent says, I'm not going to let my client take that and take less than this or whatever, and they decide what's going to happen in the negotiation. So there's ego, there's attitudes, there's lack of experience and skill in that, and the difficulty is there's not a lot of practice or training or teaching or taught on this skill set, which is causing us a lot of frustration. Would you agree that sometimes if you just let the agents get out of the way, that the negotiation and the deal can happen itself? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, 100%. A quick story here. I know that another agent and myself literally put, and I don't recommend this for everybody on the call, but we literally put buyer and seller across the table from each other and the other agent and I across from each other. And we had copies for all parties sitting in front of them. And the buyer and seller start talking and reading and negotiating in that. Literally, the other agent and I said absolutely nothing. Watched the buyer and seller in one room negotiate a transaction, even to the point where they decided who was keeping the koi fish in the koi pond on the house. True story. Okay. Then the clients look at the other agent and I and said, you guys haven't said much in that. What are your thoughts? And we looked at each other and said, well, congratulations. It looks like we have ourselves a deal. Right. And We literally didn't say one word and let the clients take care of the negotiation. We checked our egos at the door. We checked our dictation. We just were quiet and listened and watched, and it happened. And I've done this multiple times, and I don't recommend to everybody, but sometimes you just got to learn to just get out of your own way and get out of the people's way and let the transaction, let the deal, let the negotiations happen, okay? So take that into consideration. I'm not recommending it work for everybody. So sometimes you don't have the right agent on the other side, or you don't have the right couples on the other side, but take the thought of maybe just getting out of our own way. And sometimes I believe that the agents are the reason why the deals don't happen, and we're the cause of our own frustration in that when negotiation processes break down. Remember this, whatever happens in the first minute or less is what's going to happen at the end. Okay, so if there's already conflict at the beginning, you're going to have conflict at the end. So be very careful on how this plays out and how it starts. Okay, now, before we can even get to the negotiations, we got to figure out how we can get people to an offer. So here are some of my quick tips on how do I get people to make that offer? How do I get a buyer to pull the trigger, to push the button? Okay, so tip number one, if you don't ask them to buy, then you don't get the offer, right? Ask them if they're prepared to make an offer 3 times or more. Statistics show that if you ask for the order 3 or more times, you will get a 62% or higher response of getting the order if you ask right. So here's some tips for you. Can you see yourself living here? That's ask number 1. So at what price would you buy this home at? That's an ask number 2, right? So why don't we write it up? That's ask number 3, right? There are different ways of asking for the order, and asking 3 times, you'll increase your chance of getting them to make an offer 62% or more every time if you ask 3 times or more, okay? Next one, remember this. Any offer is better than no offer. Would you agree? Any offer is better than not writing an offer, to not make an offer. Like, as an agent, as on the seller and listing side, I'd be excited in that, hey, this is great. Good offer, bad offer, whatever. It's an offer. Let's go. Let's see what we can happen. How many of us in this room have had a deal start so far apart and you thought there was no chance in the world that the deal would come together, and it came together over a period of time? It's happened. But your first response is, this is not going anywhere fast at all. This is not going to happen. And it happens. How many of you experienced that in your past?
Yes, we have.
Right, absolutely. Now, one of the things I always do when I'm out with buyers is pre-write the offer, and try to write the offer at the place that we're going to write the offer at. Okay, so having your offers pre-written, having your documents all set up and ready and locked and loaded, and then writing at the property where I find that if I'm writing at the property, that I'm not making mistakes. I'm not relying on my visual, my memory, things like that. It's really good. It's just really short, so I'm not relying on that. And the longer we stay, the longer the people are psychologically buying into buying the property and being on site. Does that make sense to everybody?
Yep.
Okay. Now, the last one is to write, the next one is to write the offer at the property, because they're staying longer and they're buying in, and you're going to be less susceptible to making mistakes and relying on it. And then at the end of the day, remember that when your client is objecting, they are positioning themselves to want to be making an offer, to wanting to make an offer. So don't try and fix it. Don't try and do that, right? So let me give you an example. When a client says, oh, there's that foundation there. There's seems to be water leaking in that foundation. There's a small crack, and it looks like there's white powder around the foundation. There's water leaking in, and an agent, male agent, guys, we like, oh, you know what? You dig outside, you pull back, you put some weeping tile in, and you tar this up and seal it all up on the inside and this and that, and we try to fix it. Okay. A female, why they're better at negotiating in real estate is this: is that the female agent says to the client, well, what do you think you could do to fix that? And the husband goes, well, you just dig outside and you just put down weeping tile and you just seal it on the inside and seal it all up and that. And the female agent looks at the wife and says, oh, you're a lucky lady, right? So you see the difference between how men are treating the negotiation and the objection, trying to fix it, and ladies, they let the client fix it and take care of their own objection and keep them on course and keep them moving, okay? So a quick lesson in that is don't try and fix it. Let them, ask them how they would fix it, and keep the negotiating, keep the process moving, okay? So these are just some tips for you, simple tips on how to get them to the offer position. Okay, so what are some of the characteristics of a good negotiator? What do they bring to the table? What brings them to the table in the forefront as a good negotiator in the field, okay? So tip number 1, or the characteristic number 1, is good negotiators avoid overconfidence. They understand that they don't know it all. They're not Spartacus. They're not in control of anyone's destiny in that. They understand. I love this line here, and you can write this down, is they love to think that this is not my home, this is not my money, and this is not my decision. Okay? So they're very humble, they're very confident, but not overconfident. They're not arrogant, and they're humble, and they don't think that they know it all, and they understand that it's not their money, not their house, and not their decision. Okay? Right? Second characteristic is they're quick to identify and understand both and everybody's position. Okay, the buyer's position, the seller's position, the agent's position on both buying side, selling side. They are looking at the 360. They're able to understand and look at it and look at it. And so what does everybody want? What does everybody need? We need to address all parties' concerns here and how to position that to put a deal together. They're problem solvers. They're puzzle piece makers. They're good at putting all of the pieces, the moving parts, and moving them together, and they're quick to see what the moving parts are. They're quick to see what it is and what they need to do to make all parties feel like they're win-win negotiating, okay? Third characteristic, they know all negotiating parties have a strong desire to complete a negotiation and say, I won, or I got a deal, or I feel like I won in all areas. So they understand that it's a win-win-win-win, not a win-lose situation, okay? Last characteristic, they're constantly improving their skills, and they're very creative. Your ability to be creative outside the box, to unpackage and repackage and position yourself and think about what each party needs and what they want and how to put all the moving parts together. Would you agree? Creativity is an incredible characteristic for a good negotiator because they're always able to quick on their feet and think outside the box. Would you agree?
Yes.
Okay, absolutely. So now that we know how to get them to an offer, now we know what the characteristics of a good negotiator are. Let's look at this, okay? How to prepare both sides for the negotiation, okay? So negotiating begins with managing expectations, okay? So you have to manage all parties' expectations at the outset, okay? You need to understand and help them understand and educate them to understand how they establish their price and from a buyer side and a seller side, okay? Remember that the sellers got an anchor, okay? They anchored themselves by choosing their list price, so understand that that's where their anchor is, and we got to try and lift that anchor slowly and carefully, okay? How many of us explain the offer process and everything in advance before it even happens for their buyer or their seller? Do you guys explain how the game is played out and how it might play out before they even got to that game?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And how beneficial is that for both parties that they know and have some sort of sense of how the game's played and what's understanding it ahead of time? Is that helpful, yes or no?
Yes, because they have expectations after, for example, contingencies are just about to be lifted. They know that they may have for repairs.
Right. Exactly. So preparing them and going through and explaining to them the process. Some of them may have never done this before. And don't take that for granted, right? Don't assume that. Talk about what stays in the house, what goes in the house, right? Chattels, fixtures, talk about that, right? Talk about, their ceiling and their floor pricing. Talk about how the game's going to play. There's different styles. There's the ping pong style of negotiating, and then there's the hard and fast, take it or leave it kind of process. And that, make sure you know what your party likes to do and what they understand, and their personality types are, what they prefer. Are they hard and fast, no dick or sticker, or are they let's play the game and go back and forth? And are they quick and want it quickly, or do they want to drag it out for hours and days? Right. So really understand what your clients want and how they like to do that. Okay. The negotiating, I'm a big believer of arranging the appointment and the negotiating the process in neutral territory. And I'll talk about that in the future. But what I mean by that is that I believe one of the best places to negotiate is in the office. I don't care if it's at the listing agent's office or the buyer agent's office. I believe that in neutral ground and common ground is a better place. I remember a story here. One of my clients had a square cut log custom home in acreage. They loved her home in that. And I knew that if I didn't get her out of her home and into the office, we would never be able to detach that emotional connection she had with her home and get the deal together. Does that make sense? So look for neutral territory and do that. And then my last biggest rant here, and oh my gosh, I believe technology is just a tool. You got to understand that face-to-face, guys, 86% of all communication is nonverbal. Okay. What I mean by that is tone, eye contact, body language, inflection, voice recognition, facial expressions, things like that. That is the biggest part of the game. And I think the reason why the game is played so poorly today is that we're relying on methodologies that it loses all of its translation. We're losing our translation through texting and emailing and wireless and paperless transaction, things like that. And that's probably one of the biggest challenges today in that. And if you can get together face to face, get together voice to voice, would you all agree that 86% of the game is voice inflection, translation, tone, body language, all of those things, and that's being lost, and that's probably one of the biggest reasons why the game is being played so difficultly or so poorly in today's industry. Okay, and I get it that people don't want to see us, and I get it that there's technology in that, and what Wade, like the 80s, called, and they want their negotiating tactics back in that. I can tell you this, guys, that like, send a text. Have any of you ever had an email or a text ever misrepresented by your spouse?
Of course, yeah.
Yeah, of course. Honey, that's not what I said. No. That's what the text says. Wait, look at it. Right? That's what it says. Like, don't try and get out of it. That's right. And so we're using those methodologies to try and put a deal together, right? Would you agree that's causing us a lot of problems? A lot of problems.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
All right. So preparing ourselves. Research. Know your facts. Know the situation, know all parties, analyze your data. Don't get caught not knowing it. Don't get caught by another agent knowing more than you do and embarrassing you in that, not knowing it, right? Would you agree that there's a lot of people that don't know their data, don't know their facts, don't know their stats, okay? All right? Mm-hmm. Who are the parties? What's important to each party? Make sure you know that. Align all the parties knowing what their motivation, interests, and what's important to each party. I don't know how many times there's been single items, simple things that are heirlooms or things like that are so important to parties and nothing else is but that heirloom, right? So know that in advance, okay? Put them into the other party's shoes. Always put the seller in the buyer's shoes and the buyer in the seller's shoes. It's a great strategy, a great tactic. Be the problem solver, right? And solve the problems, right? And also be the solution as well, okay? Find common ground, right? And don't rock the boat, okay? I say this, be the rock, not the river. So check your emotions. Don't be a drama king. Don't be a drama queen. Okay. Okay. Don't be the drama queen. Don't be the drama king. Just check the emotions at it. You got to be even, Steven. You got to be level headed. You got to leave the emotions and the drama at the door. Sorry. I'm guilty of that. So I check them at the door. Okay. Now, be a champion for your clients, but be a champion be an advocate, not an adversary. Does everybody know the difference between an advocate and an adversary? Don't be trying to push too hard and make people feel like they're getting bullied. Don't do that, okay? Be an advocate, not an adversary. And remember, it's not your money, it's not your home, and it's not your decision, so don't be that white knight. I will not let them take this. This is ridiculous. This is insulting, okay? Let the customers, let the people, let the clients decide, right? Let them decide. Okay? Now, taking everybody out in a safe island when we're negotiating. Does anybody know what a safe island is on the call?
Probably like somewhere that's neutral.
Okay, so a safe island is this. I'm going to tell you what's going to happen before it happens. Okay? Why do we take people on safe islands? I'm going to tell them how this is going to happen, what's going to go on tonight, so I can get everybody to just relax and calm down. Okay? So take them out on a safe island. Tell them what they're going to do. Tell them what's going to happen. Tell them what's going to go on before it goes on, okay? Do that. Introduce the buyer agent. Introduce the selling agent. Like, be professionals. Determining where people sit. If you're going to be in the room, I'm always a firm believer, put them beside each other. Don't put them across from each other. You can limit their communication between each other, okay? There's no nodding their head, shaking their head, kicking each other and that. I almost like it where I'm in between both parties and they're on either side of me on the same side of the table. But if you've never thought about where people sit in negotiations, it is important where people sit, okay? Build rapport, okay? Get people to trust the room, trust the audience, trust everybody, right? Get them to do it. Thank them for their offer. Thank them and be generous, be thankful, show gratitude and build rapport and build that trust. Determine who will present, who's in control, who decides. I decide, you decide, okay? I always decide. So I'll tell people that this is what's going to happen. Thanks for coming in. We're going to do this. This is going to do this. We're going to do this and this and that. And a lot of times the other agent has no clue what's going to happen. So me giving them the game plan will help them out. Okay, and to let them know and set the stage of what they should do and how they should do it. So, for example, I'm going to say, Jamil's going to come in. He's, thank for the offer. Jamil's going to tell us a little bit about his people, so we know what it is. He's going to tell us about what other choices they have and other options other than ours. They tell us why he and they chose to write an offer on our place and that. He's going to go through all the terms and conditions, and he's also going to start with price because price is most important to my people. So, Jamil, you'll start with price. Then you're going to go through this. Then Jamil's going to leave the room, and then we're going to talk privately. And what you say to Jamil can be used against you, Mr. Miss Seller. Be careful. And so Jamil will leave the room. We'll talk in private. And then, Mr. Miss Seller, you have 3 decisions to make. Number 1, you can accept Jamil's offer. The good news when you accept it is that you get to move on and do what you want to do. Number 2, you can just counter it. Now, you have to be careful that if you counter Jamil's offer, you might risk losing them and losing the client, losing the party, but we'll talk about that in a minute. And then last is you could flat out reject it. And I'm going to argue with you that rejecting and stopping and stalling the whole negotiations is not going to help anybody in this point. So we're hoping that you're not going to flat out reject Jamil and his offer tonight. So without further ado, Jamil, why don't you tell us about your clients and who they are and give us a little bit of background on them? Okay. So that is, I've set the stage, taken control, and done that. Jamil's now going to humanize his buyers. He's going to review the offer. He's going to go price first because I asked him to get to the price first before he starts reading the contract backwards. I get it. There's people like to read from the back page first. Sure, okay, whatever. It's a strategy. Most of the people, you have to know that they want to know what the dollar figure is right up front, but that's okay. I'm going to ask questions. I'm going to try and catch Jamil and catch him by asking questions and see if I can get him to play some of his cards by accident. It's like poker. Get him to drop a few cards on the table by accident by asking him questions that. Most agents, would you agree with me, breach their fiduciary duty? They talk too much and they tell us too much.
Yep.
Yeah, right. And so be careful. It's all I got to do is ask a question or two, and I got them just flapping their gums away and that and getting us position ourselves in negotiation. So be careful on the negotiating side not to be breaching your fiduciary and your representing of your clients' confidentiality in that, and don't play the cards in that. And then make sure that you understand that people need to leave and give your client an opportunity to talk in private. Okay, and that's just a tip on you of how to control in the environment and how to control and set the stage for the negotiating process. Okay. So how long do you leave it for acceptance? I'm going to say, I'm going to ask. So I'm to the opinion that shorter the better. If you're in a hot market, I guess it depends. If you're in a hot market, it's going to be short. Why is it going to be short?
Well, you need to make decisions.
Well, and I don't want another offer, another bidding or a bidding war to jump in or things like that, right? So I'm going to be short. And then I might consult and ask Ramis or Jamil, like, how much time do you think you need? And I'm going to try to keep it as tight as possible so that I don't want to have other parties come to the table. I don't want to be my offer being played with another party in that. So I'm going to try. And if they say, you know what, Wade, it's impossible for me to get a hold of them and that I need more time, then I'll give them more time. But I'm going to try and keep it as tight as possible at the outset unless I'm told or instructed otherwise. Okay. So when to respond. If I'm the listing agent and a buyer comes in, I'm going to take as much time as I want. The longer I wait out, the better position I am. Why is that? Why do I take longer to respond?
Just opens a chance for more offers to come in.
Yes.
More choices.
Yeah, good. For more offers to come in, opens it up. Other reasons why I would take time to respond. Like if I was the listing agent and you gave me till 12 o'clock tomorrow, I'm going to wait till like 11:45. And what I'm hoping between now, today, until tomorrow is that you're calling me and bugging me and asking me what's going on. Why?
Right. Emotional, getting the upper hand.
Exactly, getting the upper hand. Does that make sense, right? So it's funny. When I'm presenting, I'm going to give a short window, but when I'm responding, I'm going to take my time, okay? So what's the benefit of presenting in person?
You get to see how they react.
Yeah, and also I'm going to do a better job of presenting and communicating, right? I argue that if clients knew that we just sent it and left it, and we didn't tell their story, or we didn't tell their situation, or we didn't tell them what other choices they had, or we didn't communicate to the best we could have done for our client's best interest in person, that I think they're going to be upset with me and they're going to feel like I let them down. That's my personal opinion, right? I get it that there's technology. I get it that you just send it and do all that. I understand efficiency and things like that and that. But man, oh man, if my clients knew that I could do a better job of positioning and communicating and putting them in a better position of acceptance, that I want to know that I've done that. Okay. Now there's the table tennis game with a no dick or sticker offer. One question for I'm a big thought. If I get an acceptance, if they like say Jamil brings me an offer that's 110% of the asking price, it's all clean, all cash, and that. I suggest that you make one little change. Why should you always make one little change on every contract, guys? In negotiating, why should you always make one little change?
Because then they'll feel like they paid too much.
Yes, or it was too easy. Exactly, right?
Yeah.
And then once we got acceptance, then they just nickel and dime and chisel and grind us, and the problems occur. So don't make them feel like it was too easy, but be strategically that you made some little minimal change that they're not going to be upset and move away and lose the deal. Does that make sense? So I suggest you always make some little change, okay? Moving fast, moving slow, depends on your audience, depends on what position, if you're in the buy side, sell side, so be cognizant of that and think about strategy-wise. Give them something from the buyer standpoint, give them something that maybe not quite what they wanted, but they're too scared to even lose it or even chance responding to it. Would that be the best offer possible that I could write for my buyer if it was that case? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. And would you agree, as a buyer's agent, my job they hired me to is ensure they don't pay too much for the offer or too much for the property, sorry. So a lot of times I'll say to people, I truly believe that we're going to offend them. They're going to be so upset. And have you ever had a listing agent, or you've been the listing agent, says, you know what, Jamil, I don't care how much money your clients have. My people are so upset, they don't even want you to have their home. Okay? Right? And that's what we don't want to have happen in that particular case. Okay? So my job is to make sure from the buy standpoint that my client isn't getting the flat out rejection and paying more than they have to because they've upset the sellers. My seller side is to let them stay calm and let them know that it's just an offer. It's just a starting point. Don't let them get emotionally charged in that, and that we're excited that we got it. We're grateful that we have one, and we're just going to keep the ball rolling. Would that be a fair comment for both sides of the table? Okay. All right. Now, I love this. I'm going to talk about, are you a messenger and are you a negotiator? Okay. Here are the differences between messengers and negotiators, and you'll identify with this, and I'll send you the slide deck. Here's a messenger agent. The seller is asking for a higher price and setting it at a price that's not going to be it, and the agent just accepts it. Okay. The buyer lowballs it on a home, and they offer the agent just sets it. They don't challenge the seller's asking price. They don't challenge the buyer's asking price. Okay. They treat the client's initial request as it's the only position, right? They just assume that the client's not going to continue on, and that they're just poor messengers because they're not even they're just taking instruction from their clients, and they're going back and forth like robots. Okay, they're scared of challenging either party's positions. Okay, that's a messenger. They believe that just agreeing with the clients is the client's best interest, and not questioning them, not being an advisor, not educating them, not doing anything, just being that agreeing upon it, and then minion just running back and forth, okay, between the parties and that. They see the client's representation as they have to agree with them and they have to agree with their position. They never question it. They add no value, wisdom, or counseling to the transaction in the game back and forth. They just go back and forth and back and forth. They don't add any value, any insight, any expertise, any knowledge, any facts whatsoever. And they make the final agreement difficult, if not impossible, to put together. Have you ever done a deal with the messenger agent in your career?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely. Now, here are the characteristics of a negotiator, okay? When the seller requests a high asking price, the agent will question the seller's position. When the buyer wants to make a lowball offer, they'll just question their position, okay? They won't tell them they can't and won't. They'll just question them and get them to think differently. Would you agree that's a skill set of a negotiator, by positioning and asking that, okay? They'll question a client's position. They'll put their client in the other client's shoes. They'll provide content, information, objections. They'll provide objective standards. They'll focus and they'll remind everybody of what everybody wants and all parties' interest in that, okay? They'll see everybody's position, not just their own or their own client's position, okay? They'll provide options. They'll remind everybody of what their choices are and what their consequences are, right? And they'll manage everybody's expectations, and they're always focused on the client and the client's best interest, and they're staying to point, and they're staying to what, and they're not being dramatic. They're not being emotionally charged. Would you agree that those are excellent skill sets to a negotiator versus a messenger? Yes or no?
Yeah.
Okay, 100%. Some of your tactics. So I don't know if you know this. So tactic number one is the flinch. So when somebody brings an offer and it's a lowball offer, a flinch is this: when I go like that, and you flinch and you shrug your shoulders and you flinch in that. A flinch is an adverse animated reaction to someone or something you heard, okay? The crunch negotiating tactic is when you're getting a concession, when you give something, but you want something back, okay? You're asking, a crunch is this the best you can do, okay? That's called the crunch, okay? A bracket is where you are limiting or you have limitations of controlling the expectations ahead of time. So a bracket is like you're trying to manage something that may happen ahead of time before it actually plays out. That's called a bracket. Okay? Limited authority or higher authority. Okay, everybody's heard of this. That's where I got to check with my manager. I got to check with the wife. I got to check with the husband. The powers that be. That's a limited authority tactic. Okay. A trade.
Hey Wade, your mic kind of goes in and out. So I don't know if you can keep the mic close to your mouth or
sure. Sorry,
because it goes in and out.
Is that better there?
Yeah, that's better.
Okay. So the flinch is when you just react like that. A crunch is when you're asking if that's the best you can do. A bracket is where you're trying to handle things that might handle before it and ahead of time. The limited authority is where you got to talk to the broker, you got to talk to the powers that be. A trade-off is when you give a little and you take a little more. The competition is providing alternatives. So you're saying there's alternatives to their choice and what they're choosing to buy. There's not just this. The legitimacy is where you actually put it in writing. It's visually there in writing. You're not telling, you're showing and selling and putting in writing. A bold stroke is where you're suggesting to meet a certain point and all parties kind of go here. So could we see everybody come into this position or this point? That's called a bold stroke. A nibble is where you're just asking for a little bit more. And then the silence is when you know that silence is a strong negotiating tactic where he or she who speaks first loses, right? And that. So those are just some of my favorite negotiating tactics when you're in the negotiating game and how to play that. Last thing I want to share with you is some winning words, okay? So here are some of the winning words. When you're in negotiation, use the word investment instead of cost or price. It's a word or term called investment, okay? Instead. Change it and say, let's put it in writing instead of saying, why don't you sign a contract or write a contract on? So let's just use the term, let's put it in writing, okay? Use the term compensation instead of commissions or fees, compensation. Another good dialogue is, let me double check that, okay? So you're not saying yes, you're not saying no, you're just using the dialogue, let me double check that, okay? Another good term is to use this, and I love this term, is this is standard. Okay, that makes people feel like it's normal or it's unexpected or it's normal. So this is standard. I love this term. It's called it's a fair offer, right? And so it's not saying or insulting that. It's a fair offer. Another good term is this sounds reasonable. Another good term is that's not unusual. That's kind of normal. Okay. And then another good term in negotiating is I want to make sure you're comfortable. So if you have a high, sensitive, amiable client, you're always checking in how they're feeling. Are you feeling comfortable? I want to make sure you're comfortable. Okay, so using that term in dialogue. I love this one. I understand where you're coming from, Jamil. I understand where you're coming from. Or you're high priority to me, letting people know in the negotiating that they're important to you. And then I love this dialogue here. How many of you like this term? So what I hear you saying is this. So what I hear you saying is this, right? And so people want to know that they've been heard and that they're clarified and you know what's being communicated. It's important in that. And then let me see what I can do, and I'm going to do my best. Okay, so here are some great winning words in negotiating of using these terms that, and I'll send you these terms and you can use these terms that they work so well in that win-win negotiating strategy and tactic, okay? Last tips here. Keep the momentum moving, keep the negotiating going. Don't let it stall, okay? Just keep the business and keep it going some way, shape, or form somehow, right? A stalled conversation, keep it moving, basically keep going. A stalled deal is a dead deal, okay? Cut the time frames in half. So when people always, they always move faster than what they say. So if somebody says, I'll get back to you in a couple hours, cut that time frame in half. And like Kenny Rogers, the gambler, said, you got to know when to fold them. You got to know when to walk away. You got to know when to run. Okay, so those are really powerful negotiating tips. And that one of my favorite strategies is that, would you agree, you can't want it more than your client wants it. You got to know when to walk away and when to fold it and just say, okay, it's off. And then they're like, whoa, wait a minute, man, come back. Okay, we're not done yet. Okay, right? So last things here. You can't want the deal more than your clients. Okay, prepare your clients for the walkaway, and when you prepare them for the walkaway, don't make a threat and don't tell them you're walking away and a threat and a promise that you cannot keep, because you're going to get egg on your face. So if you're coming back and you're not done, don't say you're not coming back, and don't say you're done. Okay, guys? Don't be caught with your hands in the cookie jar. Okay? Love to play the game, right? And know, right? And be known to play that game, and knowing it. Like, do you have agents in your guys' marketplace that you love doing deals with and love negotiating because they're so good at it? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah. And would you love to be known as that great game player out there? Yes or no?
Yes.
Yeah, absolutely, right? And so I'd encourage you to be that. So remind you that the best negotiating is when everybody wins. You always reinforce your client's decisions, right? Don't be the first to speak. Everybody always gets buyer remorse or seller remorse. Be aware of that. We always buy emotionally and justify logically. You got to reassure them. You're the expert. You got to reassure them, and you're the expert and you're the person, and you got to remind them of what they wanted and what their outcome was and of their goals. Does that make sense? Right? So
Yeah.
You're the one that's got to reassure them. You're got to remind them of their goals and that. And the last nugget I'm going to share with you guys is playing the game is remind yourself that what you do to others is what you'd want to be done to you in the negotiating strategies, right? So play it and follow the golden rule. Do unto others as you would want to be done to you in the negotiating strategies and that, and play it like a champ and play it like a champion out there in that. Any questions or thoughts or comments from you guys there today? Did you get one nugget for negotiating today? One nugget out of the presentation?
Any questions?
I know I have a question. I think Such has a question.
Yeah.
No? Okay. So I have a question. Let's say, we always come down to this point and they go, okay, this is the final offer.
Yes.
Whether you're at the offer stage or you're at the inspection stage, and we have buyer and seller there, and let's just say we're at the inspection stage, and then the buyer's asking for more than the seller's going to give, and the seller's agent says, listen, this is it, we're not doing anything else. What do you say to that?
Well, that I guess goes back to my slide deck here, Jamil. I'd say if that's the case, then that's great. But don't make a threat or don't make that comment if that's not the truth, right? Has anybody made that threat or comment and then all of a sudden your clients come back and you get egg all over your face and now you look like you don't have any integrity? Now you look like you're in a position of weakness if it comes back to bite you, that wasn't the case. And that was, I'm okay with playing hard and fast and saying that no, and digging your heels in. I guess if you have enough experience, Jamil, would you agree with me that you know that these people want it bad enough that you can dig your heels in and pull and draw a line in the sand? Okay.
Yeah, I'm talking more. The other agent is saying, we're on the buying side, they're
Yes.
on the selling side. They're saying this is all the seller is willing to do. Otherwise, forget it. We're going to go back on the market.
Yeah. And I'm okay with that as long as you know that that's truthful. Or the reality is that, would you agree with me? You can't let it go for pittance and fall apart right? So one of my favorite strategies is to break things down to the minimum. Do you know what I'm talking about there? How to break things down to the minimum? Like only a coffee away or a coffee cup a day away kind of thing? Or when you're breaking things down to like we're only like 0.0018% apart from this deal, Jamil? Like, really? We're going to let this go for 0.0018%. So my favorite strategy is to minimize and break it down to the simple and break it down to, well, pardon the term, break it down to the stupid. Like, really, man, we're going to let this die for 0.0018% of the asking price?
Yeah.
Is that helpful?
So minimize the difference.
Correct.
Minimize if you're 10,000 away.
Yeah.
On inspections or the price.
Yeah.
Minimize it. We're only 10,000 away.
No, even go deeper.
This much to make it work.
Go deeper. Like, that's only 0.018% of the asking price. Really? We're like a millifraction percentage away from putting this together, and we're going to let this go for that? Really?
Yeah.
Really? Right? So 10,000, man, and anybody in the room's books, 10,000 is a lot of money. It's a lot of money to me. I don't care who you are. But 0.0018% of the asking price, that just seems so ridiculous now when I've broken it down even further. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Yeah. So break it down to the ridiculous, right? So you're like, you got to be kidding me, right? What is that? Like, and you quickly pull your phone out and calculate it, and we're talking 0.018% of the asking price, total price here.
Yeah.
Like, we're fools for letting this fall apart. Let's put this together. So, and then you break it down to the minimum to the clients as well, and then put the onus on them, right? Like it's a coffee a day for 30 days. Drink Dunkin' Donuts. Don't go to Starbucks for 30 days, and all of a sudden you got your home now, right?
Yeah.
Another strategy of presenting it to the simple and to the ridiculous, right? If that helps you.
Yep.
Good. Any other questions or comments or thoughts?
No, it was great. Thank you. Wade.
Awesome. Thanks for playing the game with me today, guys. And that, happy negotiating out there. I'll send the slide deck so everybody can use the references in there. There's a ton of content, so I just wanted to pack in as much as I could for you, some nuggets today. And thanks for everybody's time, and enjoy your negotiating strategies out there, and have a good rest of your week. Okay, everyone?
Hey, Wade, just quick thing. Can we do some scripts for calling maybe in the next couple of weeks?
Done. Deal.
Okay.
Yeah.
Okay.
Deal.
Okay.
Okay.
Sounds good. Thank you.
All right, guys. All right.
Bye-bye.
Thanks, everybody. Bye for now.
Bye-bye. All right.